A young mother became frazzled about Christmas preparations. She was tired, irritated. She got into a department store elevator and exclaimed she believed that whoever thought up this Christmas stuff should be strung up and shot. A voice from the back of the elevator commented, "Don't worry, we already crucified him." Apparently there was complete silence as the elevator descended to the ground floor. The truth is, Jesus did not start this whole Christmas thing. Not the part that frustrates us. He certainly never intended what the moneymakers want, which is for Christmas to become a celebration of acquisition. In fact, as far as we know, Jesus never mentioned his birthday in the first place, nor asked us to celebrate it. We do so because we want to express our joy over an event that began a whole new way of looking at the world and at life. Now, the details of the first Christmas almost certainly came from someone other than Jesus. My father once talked about how he thought Luke must have heard his stories from Mary. And there's something appealing about the thought of an aging Mary sitting with a Greek physician and sharing some of the things she'd pondered over in the years since Bethlehem. Now, I'm sure she would have been glad that millions would celebrate the events of that night, but also perplexed that the celebration would somehow be lost in the shuffle of worldly affairs. Or perhaps she would be all too familiar with that possibility. Mary and Joseph had to leave their quiet village of Nazareth because of worldly affairs. A census had been decreed. Everyone was supposed to go to the city of their forefathers. Joseph's family was of the house of David, so they'd ended up in Nazareth, but their roots were in Bethlehem. For man alone, the journey from Nazareth to Bethlehem would not have been overly difficult. But Joseph was not alone. He had his wife to consider. Could Mary have remained in Nazareth? Well, she probably could have. It's unlikely the Roman government was interested in counting women. We don't know why Mary traveled with Joseph. She may have been afraid. She may have been uncomfortable about staying in Nazareth alone. Because there could have been some whispering about her situation. But she did have family, and they would have protected her, especially since Joseph had obviously already accepted the situation. It almost seems as if Mary chose to go with Joseph. From a storyteller's perspective, I've speculated that she thought it was fitting for this child to be born in Bethlehem. Ultimately, we don't know. We're only told that she went. We're also not told that Mary and Joseph loved each other. Now, at that time, marriages were usually arranged, though logic and human nature says they had to be sometimes arranged because of the feelings people had for each other. But I think this journey, taken together when it was not necessary, points to their love and commitment. Mary wanted to be with Joseph at this time more than she wanted to be in Nazareth, even though that was her home and that was where her family lived. And we can only imagine what the journey was like. Mary either had to walk, or as tradition suggests, Joseph managed to secure a donkey for her to ride upon. Now, that might be better than walking, but to be 9 months pregnant riding a donkey isn't my idea of comfortable. Labor pains had to have started by the time they reached Bethlehem. Joseph must have been frantic to find a place for Mary, but the town was full. Others had returned to their hometown for the census as well. There was no room at the inn, and apparently no one felt they could give shelter to these strangers. Now, it's not fair to be too hard on the people of Bethlehem. None of us would feel comfortable about taking a stranger into our home, and they may have already taken friends and relatives in and be filled up. And Keeper likely didn't feel he could kick someone else out to make room for them. Somehow it still pains us to think the only place Joseph could find for his wife to give birth was in a stable. Now, no doubt the area was dimly lit by some sort of primitive lamp. The weather probably wasn't too cold. Scholars point out the weather must have been fairly good, or the sheep wouldn't have been on the hillsides. They'd have been safe in the folds. But if there was any warmth needed in the stable, it was provided by the breath of the animal. It could have been a small fire, but that's really a bad idea around hay. There was no electric lights. There was no central heating. There was no telephones to call for a doctor. There was no fetal monitors. No anesthesia to take the edge off the pain. They didn't know about germs. They didn't know about creating sterile conditions. In America, the idea of a great man rising from humble conditions is a sort of proud icon. In the days of Jesus, it was not. There's a story about a man who asked a teacher why God spoke to Moses from a prosaic thing as a thorn bush. The teacher said, perhaps it was to teach us we can find God everywhere, even in a humble thorn bush. The Apostle Paul said God chose the foolish things of this world to confound the wisdom of this world. He said that God's foolishness is better than the greatest human wisdom. And Jesus began his life in humble circumstances. He was born in the way all babies are born. Many people who looked upon him seemed to see nothing remarkable. We have wonderful stories about the events surrounding that night, but relatively few people were involved. I wonder sometimes if the angels did sing for more people than the shepherds, but the shepherds were the only ones who had the spiritual imagination to hear it. Some foreigners apparently recognized the sign of a king's birth in the stars, but most people paid no attention. Elizabeth Barrett Browning wrote, "Earth's crams with heaven, and every common bush afire with God. But only he who sees takes off his shoes. The rest sit round it and pluck blackberries." It is not sentimentality that leads Christians to feel pain at the thought Jesus was born in a stable. Among other things, I believe we have a keen awareness, or perhaps a fear, that if we had lived in Bethlehem 20 centuries ago, we might have been the ones picking blackberries instead of the ones bringing gifts to the manger. We were more fortunate than the citizens of Bethlehem were because we know the rest of the story. But even at that, we sometimes look upon wonderful things without the wonder they deserve. The grown-up Jesus was not being an idealist when he said there is more to life than bread. He actually was being pragmatic when he told us that the true and lasting treasures are the things we do not store up on earth but in heaven, where neither thief nor time can steal or destroy. The needs of the human spirit are very much the same as they were when Jesus was born. We still need love. We still need peace. Our spirits are still hungry for more than bread, even amongst those who don't know why they are starving. Remember this: earth is still crammed with heaven. Just need to open our hearts to see it. Amen.